On the show today, we have a very special guest. His name is Chip Fisher, and he'll be joining us from New York. And he's a chairman at Fisher Wallace Laboratories. He's actually invented a cranial electrotherapy stimulation device, and it's used to treat people with PTSD, bipolar, and depression. Stay tuned. Hi, Chip. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Evan. It's great to be here.
How's New York? How's the weather out there?
It's really hot. It's about
Is it really?
92 degrees here. Yeah, it's like they just broke a record today. So, I walked around the reservoir a couple of times just to get some exercise, but it felt like the middle of August. So not great. But it's going to rain in a little bit, so we'll
Oh,
be.
cool. A little bit of
I know
relief there.
it doesn't happen that often in Los Angeles.
So let me go straight into the questions here. What is the Fisher Wallace Stimulator?
Sure. Well, the Fisher Wallace Stimulator is a medical device, FDA medical device, which treats depression, anxiety, and insomnia. It's actually been on the market under a different brand name, before 2006. It was invented by two NASA MIT guys, both who were electrical engineers, and they worked with a team of doctors to basically come up with a non-pharmacological method of treating depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Our device category is called cranial electrotherapy stimulation. It's also referred to in literature in peer studies as TACS, or transcranial alternating current stimulation. You'll also see the phrase TDCS used, which is the direct current version, which does not have any commercial application at this point, but TACS has. And so our device and a couple of others on the market, ours is the leading device, and it's the only one that works transcranially. There are others that use ear clips and patches and things like that, but they really aren't reaching deeply into the brain the way ours is. So ours has been in the market since 1991. It basically uses a very mild form of alternating current to stimulate key neurotransmitters like serotonin.
How does it do that?
Sure. Well, basically, just to show you the device very simply, because its visuals are always great, this is the base unit. It basically runs on two AA batteries. Very simple. We make these in New Jersey. They're domestically made in a medical grade plant. There are two wires that come with sponge applicators. You can see here they're wet, and you basically wear them here and here with a headband, and you wear that 20 minutes once or twice a day for 30 days, and then is needed after that. But the effects happen pretty quickly. We have about a 75 to 80% success rate in one of the indications that we treat, which are depression, anxiety, and insomnia. We've also had success in treating different forms of chronic pain, including fibromyalgia. This will suppress migraines because it decreases blood flow by about 46% in the brain during a 20-minute period. And you can also use it on your body for different forms of chronic pain, basically knee and elbow, back pain. We've also treated gout. It will break up the sugar crystals in someone's foot, and it can be used.
Is it kind of like a magnet or a resonance, or how does it work?
No, there are no magnets. It's actually electrotherapy. So
Okay.
it's a very mild form. If you're familiar with electroconvulsive therapy, it works on the same principles. That's also using alternating current. The problem with electroconvulsive therapy is that it's 800 to 1,000 milliamps. It's very strong.
Isn't that what they used to use in the old days for people who had like schizophrenia?
Yes, and they still do, and it does work well. But the problem is that you have seizures, you have to be under anesthesia, you risk memory loss. There are all sorts of side effects with ECT because it's very powerful. We've harnessed the best aspects of that in a home use device. This is only 1 to 4 milliamps. So if you see the gradations here, you'll see numbers 1 through 4, and we start people usually on the second level. We found that's the best one to start with, and depending on the strength of your symptoms, you can use it on a higher level. It's perfectly safe. This is way.
Can you sleep with it, by the way?
Yeah, but I mean, you wouldn't. You can help. It helps you go to sleep. You can actually use it to go to sleep, and sometimes I'll use it while I'm going to sleep, and it will actually put me to sleep. And then the good thing is that it turns off after 20 minutes, so you don't have it on
That's cool.
all night. I mean, if you used it for an hour, you might get a headache because that's a lot, but a 20-minute session is very mild, and you could even double up. But we recommend using it once or twice a day for 30 days, and then as needed after that. So it's basically using we use very specific waveforms. It's called a bipolar square waveform. So basically, what you're doing is you're stimulating neuronal activity, and then there's an off period, and then you're stimulating off period, and by stimulating activity and then having an equivalent reaction period, your body is responding to the electrotherapy, and basically it's allowing it to adjust to and actually benefit from that level of stimulation. That's in sharp contrast to direct current stimulation, where you basically have a flat line. You stimulate for, let's say, 20-minute periods, all the same, and then the body reacts at the end. On this, there's more of a building block effect. We also use 3 very functional and patented frequencies. One is in the range of 15,000 hertz, which is a carrier frequency, which basically helps us pierce the skull and bone matter. 500 is a modulating frequency, which basically cuts the physiological effect in half. And the body's influence between 0 and 100.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
Sure. Well, I mean, a carrier frequency, basically, there are different wavelengths.
Okay.
Some are higher, some are lower. And the important one is, in our case, was to capture the lowest frequency, which is around 15 hertz, to figure out the number that would actually stimulate the greatest number of neurotransmitters. And it also correspondingly lowers cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Huh. Very interesting.
Basically, yeah. So that's a side benefit, but it is a very important one.
And has this device has this device been tested? Like in trials?
I'm sorry? Yes, we published on bipolar depression a couple of years ago at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, which is the first time anyone has shown a device to work on bipolar depression. We also did a 400 patient study on recovering drug addicts in treating their anxiety and insomnia during detox, and with only 5 treatments, we were able to increase the retention in a residential treatment program by 50%. As measured after 90 days. So the device works quickly when it works, and it's quite profound.
That's impressive, honestly.
Thank you. I know it's hard to believe these numbers, except that we have studies that show that they're true. And the body is full of water. We're electrical beings, and so if you hit it right, you're doing the same things that drugs are doing, but without the side effects. And there are no long-term issues. We've had people on this for 30 or 40 years. It's such a mild form of therapy that we haven't seen any long-term side effects, which is great. In contrast to drugs, about half our business is actually titrating people off of key sleeping medications, because sleeping medications are very addictive. They're very hard to get off of, and they have enormous side effects. They tend to stimulate deep sleep, but correspondingly, they actually suppress REM sleep. And if you don't have REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, then you're not going to have a restful night's sleep. But this does both.
So, do you think this is a good alternative for people to use instead of using harmful medications?
Very much so. Yeah, and I think there are more and more people. I mean, there was just a big report today about the dangers of benzodiazepines. There have been others about sleeping medications over the course of many years. People getting into their cars, driving off in the middle of the night, eating everything in their refrigerators. I mean, there are really bad side effects to many of these drugs, and of course, those side effects are suppressed. I came to this because I took a number of antidepressants.
That's what I wanted to ask you about that, Chip. I mean, sure. What's your origin story? How did you come up with this idea?
Sure. Well, I didn't invent it, actually, because it was invented by two MIT guys. But I met my first partner, Martin Wallace, who's no longer alive, but started the company with me. And he basically knew the founders, both of whom were very knowledgeable about this and had worked with a team of doctors to really come up with and understand these principles. They understood the principles that were very sound about doing a mild form of electrotherapy. It was a matter of finding the right frequencies. These principles have been around for a long time. And the most successful aspect of it actually was, until, let's say, the late 80s, electroconvulsive therapy, but it's obviously too invasive and too difficult to administer. And only 100,000 people in the country get it a year, which is a very small number when you consider we have 350 million people in this country, and 30% of them suffer from one of the three symptoms that we treat. So the market is massive, and it's really just a matter of time before people adopt to using these as opposed to drugs. But this was invented and came of age during the early period of heavy drug marketing of Prozac and Wellbutrin and a whole bunch of other drugs. So it was very difficult to compete against the pharmaceutical industry at the time. It's less so now because a lot of people are really discovering on their own through going on the internet and understanding our story and reading the story on, as we describe it, and then seeing the studies and the evidence. And the people that we have on our medical advisory board are some very substantial people. We have Meyer Krieger, who's the head of the sleep department at Yale, who was basically the first person to diagnose sleep apnea in 1971. We have a retired one-star who was head of, about a third of the medical division, one of the medical divisions of the U.S. Army. So and these people are not compensated. They all are, and the founder of Phoenix House, who which is the largest drug treatment company in the country. And these are people with great substance who really like what we're doing and have worked with us to help get the word out.
Okay, and so have you ever tried any of these antidepressant medications for your personal use?
I did, yes. I started on Prozac, and I used Paxil and Wellbutrin, and all of them had severe side effects for me. I couldn't stay on any of them for more than a week or two. I found that all of them changed my personality dramatically. And I'm not trying to speak ill of pharma. It's just they didn't work for me, and then I didn't have a solution, and I came across this, and this was profound in its effect for me. I don't want to be the poster boy for my own product, but on a personal level, when I was first investigating the company, I was very much a customer. And so I was very impressed with its results. And a number of my friends who were seeking treatment used it as well, just, to give me candid feedback.
It'd be great to have someone like Jordan Peterson, who's recently been admitted to rehab for Klonopin, to try something like this. It would make a lot of sense.
It is very difficult to titrate off these drugs. They're profoundly strong and very addictive. It's very difficult, and even when people are working with someone to titrate slowly off many of these drugs, it's very, very challenging. But we do have peer evidence on treating both drug and alcohol addiction. So, we have been able to help.
How about schizophrenia? I'm curious.
Well, schizophrenia, we started to do a study, but the problem is it's very difficult to screen for it because there are so many different types of it. And so doing a peer study in a particular range is challenging. Having said that, the symptoms are very closely aligned with or similar to those found in bipolar patients. So we feel that this has enormous promise for schizophrenic patients. Again, we can't make medical claims until we have a peer study, but because we were so successful in treating bipolar 2, non-manic bipolar depression, we feel that the potential is enormous. And it's really, again, just a matter of time and money.
And what about personality disorders? Is that like a different realm that's not affected by this?
It's a similar realm, but
is it really?
Yeah, I mean, it's all connected. Again, it would be a stretch to say that it has an effect on borderline personality disorder, but certainly in many cases, we've had patients who've had severe symptoms in one of these sort of in that range and have had success with it. We don't really keep track quite as assiduously as we might with people who are using it, let's say, on their own, sort of off-label, if it's something that's related, but not something that we specifically treat. But it is, borderline personality disorder is within sort of the depression range of sorts. So again, with all of these things, there is promise. But it's just, and for example, I mean, with addiction, we've had people who've used this for smoking cessation, and we feel that there might because it's nicotine, that there might be huge potential here for treating vaping, which is an enormous scourge, which is now just coming to the fore. And there's so many people who want to stop, because they now realize how dangerous it is.
Yeah, I heard a lot of bad stories about vaping. The company Juul, I think, was ordered to stop selling them, right?
Well, I think they were just ordered to stop selling the flavored, the products that appeal to
Right,
kids.
because it attracts kids. Right.
It's beyond me how they can't, they have to now prove that something's bad, even though they know it's bad. The CDC does, in order to take something off the market that really is essentially a public health risk. And
Right. Anytime you're taking something into your lungs like that, it's a carcinogen. Even if it's weed, unfortunately, for some people out there, that might be.
that's right. No, and weed is, there's a great book out now called Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana. It's a Times author. It's a fantastic book about, it's about causing both psychosis and schizophrenia. And these are, there's pure evidence on this. This is not, he really did his homework. And a lot of, the problem is now marijuana, I'm 63. So the marijuana that was around when I was in high school had probably 1 to 2% THC, not very strong.
By the way, did you ever smoke a joint?
I did. I inhaled as well.
Okay.
But I actually stopped. I smoked it for a little while in 10th grade. And then a friend of mine who actually was a dealer, who is now a minister in California with 6 children. So he's, gone clean. But he, was a very low level dealer. But he basically bought something for someone that he had not had any experience with. And one Friday night, we sat around, as we usually did on every other Friday night, and we smoked this, and I was high for 2 days. And as it turned out, because we had this analyzed later on, we had some left, that what we were smoking was laced with ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer. And
that's horrible.
Yeah, it was dreadful, and I was high for 2 days, and I never touched anything after that. I'm just, I'm not a teetotaler. I do have a glass of wine or beer once in a while, but I'm so happy that happened to me, because our ranges of experience when you have these gateway drugs is so much greater and so much more dangerous than most people think. And so people who have children who think that it's just, it's okay, they're just smoking weed. It's not okay. Unfortunately, this stuff is so strong, and you don't know where it's coming from, and you don't know what it's being laced with. It's just, that's the deal. So, and now cocaine has a lot of fentanyl in it in many states, but the states that have legalized marijuana without any form, without considering a decent level of education about the dangers, have had explosions in violent crime, in domestic violence, car crashes, kids eating gummy bears, all sorts of things, Colorado especially. And these health costs have almost uniquely, in every case, outweighed the taxation benefits of legalizing marijuana. I do feel that it should be decriminalized. It's not a good idea to lock people up for small amounts of marijuana. That's not a good idea.
I agree with you there.
If you don't educate people on the dangers of a drug, like anything else, whether it's drinking or cigarettes or something like that, the lobbyists have prevented this from happening. And it's really bad. And we're going to wake up one day and people are going to be in big trouble. And Juul was able to go out and, talk to high schoolers and tell them it was perfectly safe. They knew damn well it wasn't safe, or they couldn't prove that it was safe. And the penetration level of vaping, is much greater. It goes all the way to the capillary levels of the lungs. And I had read some peer studies a year ago saying that there was going to be an epidemic coming. A lot of this research was being done in England, not here. And so I sensed trouble a long time ago, as did a lot of other people in our industry. But the problem is that clearly it's better than smoking, but it's sort of like saying I'm going to hit myself on the toe with a hammer as opposed to on my head. The likelihood is I won't get brain injury.
Right. It's just a different type of injury.
It's not exactly. And so you're not trading one bad thing for a good thing. You're trading it for something that's bad in other ways. But this whole thing with lung collapse and causing pneumonia-like symptoms is really horrific.
It is. It is very horrific. And I know with marijuana, too, I've also read studies where people can also get heart attacks.
Yes, that's possible, too. It depends on the strength of the pot. Some of the weed that's out there has a strength of anywhere between 25 and as high as, on average, it's about 25% THC in many cases, and it can be as high as 50%, which is just brutal.
Now, how much is the device, and can someone use insurance to purchase it through their doctor?
Sure. Well, these retail for $6.99, and many insurance companies do cover them. It just depends on the insurance company. I know United and Anthem do cover it, but not wholly. And we have been working with a number of insurance companies to see if they will extend coverage. But we believe that over time it will. If you're in Maine, it's free. It's covered by Medicaid. So if you are a Maine Care patient, you can get it for free.
Okay. And are there any other questions or answers that you would like to give me that I didn't ask?
Well, I think, thank you, and thank you for having me on the show. I think people should really dig deeply and look at look at technologies like this. There are also, I think, what's happening now, which is a little bit scary, is that some people, while people really understand what we're doing and are adopting new wearables, and we sell tens of thousands of these a year, a lot of people are now starting to look at apps as a solution, healthcare apps, which are good, but they really don't solve the problem. And I would urge people, while you want to track some things and use some of the apps that are out there to maybe understand, when you're feeling bad and you want to explore one of these applications, they can be helpful. But those are not true solutions. They're really not. They're not stimulating key neurotransmitters nor lowering cortisol, which are the things that you really have to do in order to affect change.
That's
also,
what I'm really interested in, the lowering of cortisol. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, all of us, experience stress at some level, and the world is a stressful place, and it's becoming more so. I mean, just in terms of technology, how it's driving the economy and people's work pace and the way they live their lives and the way they communicate, especially millennials on up. And it's really, it's a little scary. And so you have to really be aware of that and aware of, things that will make you happy, that will generate, something nice during your day, and and deal with these problems. But many of the healthcare apps are good, but they really are not focused on solving the problem the way technology like ours does.
Now, for someone who doesn't suffer from any of these mental disorders or personality issues, can they still benefit from using this device?
Absolutely, because everybody's a little bit off, and no one has a perfect scenario. It's everybody has stressful days, and this just helps people relax and sleep. Particularly, sleep has been really the most effective thing because of screen time. First of all. People staying up later. In 100 years ago, in 1920, the average person in this country got 9 hours of sleep, average adult, which is an extraordinary number. People went to bed when it was dark, and they didn't wake up until dawn. They would go to bed, electricity was expensive. A lot of people didn't even have it, and they wanted to save money. And they would go to bed when the sun went down. And if that was 9 o'clock in the summer, then they would get up at 6. So they would really sleep through the night. And sometimes people would get up, but then they would go back to bed. So they got a lot more sleep than people do now. And an adult should get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep. I shoot for 8, kind of hard, but let's say I get 7.5. That's still great. I cannot survive on 6. And that's really people of all ages. Everybody says, when you get older, you don't need a lot of sleep. That's not true. You should be sleeping at every stage of your life.
Well, according to Elon Musk, he only gets 3 hours of sleep.
There are people who have perfect sleep architecture who seem to just can function on very little sleep. But I don't believe that that's healthy. And in most cases, there are people who can do that. 3 hours is not a lot of sleep.
Where can people find more information about the Fisher Wallace Stimulator?
On our website, which is fisherwallace.com. And we also have an over-the-counter version of the device, which is the same device, but you can get it on Amazon, which is Circadia, .info. So if you don't want to get a healthcare permission, you can order the same device on Amazon, and it's circadia.info.
Thank you very much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. It was great to speak to you. Thank you for the intuitive questions, and I hope this has been helpful to your listeners.